simultaneously. We're now going to move on to item 9.1, outcome of the options appraisal, August 2024, for reinforced autoclaved aerated concrete. And Mr. Booth, I believe your team are going to say a few words first. Thank you.
Thank you, Lord Provost. I will start on behalf of all of us. So, thank you for giving us the opportunity to just introduce the report today. You'll recall that at Urgent Business Committee on 29th of February, we agreed to prepare a report within 6 months detailing the outcome of the options appraisal and outlining the recommended option. And that is obviously what we have in front of us today. The report details the options appraisal that has been undertaken, and it provides an overview of feedback from the recent engagement that we've undertaken with council tenants, homeowners and the wider community. I think what I'd like to say first is that, and I know I speak on behalf of my colleagues too, we do recognise the uncertainty, the worry that this situation has created for everyone. And I think we heard that raw emotion come through the deputations today. We know there's no perfect solution here. This is an incredibly difficult position that yourselves in terms of making that decision today. But what we've done is try to present as comprehensive an account of the information that has been collated in order for you to do that. As I've done in previous updates, I think it's appropriate to just provide an update on our rehoming programme. As I've said previously, we do recognise the impact of moving home. Individuals and families have been living in their homes for many, many years. The disruption to support networks, the sense of community, the links to education and health systems, incredibly unsettling. Our approach has continued in terms of that person-centred approach, really working on an individual basis with households and families. You'll be aware we've created the RAAC Impact Housing List to create priority in that process to enable us to allocate houses on the basis of a household's needs. In terms of an updated position, 154 leases have been signed as at yesterday. Some of those are with the City Council, others are with registered social landlords, and a further 10 households have sourced alternative accommodation. We will continue to work with those families who are yet to be rehomed to achieve that positive outcome as much as we can for those individuals and those families, obviously recognising the restrictions that we have on the stock that's available. And just to clarify, I think it's one of the things that came up before, we do have a number of private tenants and owners who have been added to the RAAC Impact Housing List as per what was agreed at Urgent Business Committee, so we're working through with those individuals and families too. Okay, I think, and we heard it through the deputations, there's two key areas that remain a priority that really are impacting on people, and one is that impact as people, families move from the area, the environmental and safety impacts that present as a result. I have spoken about that previously, but still very much at the front of the support that we need to provide, and we do need to be responsive to that and amend our response to that when we hear about kind of the issues that are being faced. So we continue to have regular engagement with the Community Safety Partnership. I'd mentioned previously we had a crime prevention visit undertaken, and we've implemented measures kind of around in response to that. So there are ongoing security measures for the void properties. Important part of that is the effective management of utilities. What I mean by that is kind of the draining down of the systems, the disconnections, to ensure there's no risk that's presented from a void property. We've increased our warden patrols. Our housing and support officers visit the site regularly as part of their engagement with the community. and our waste and grounds team are being responsive to when we alert them to additional waste that needs to be uplifted. I'm not going to say it's perfect. We need to continue to understand what's happening within the area, and we will continue to review and identify any further action that we need to implement around that. The other area I wanted to highlight was around mental health and wellbeing support. I think we've really heard that come through really quite strongly through the deputations this morning. Whilst there has been some clarity for tenants in terms of a rehoming process, that absolutely hasn't taken away the challenge that has presented for them. And at the same time, for homeowners, there has been greater uncertainty, whilst they have obviously been taking a keen interest in what the outcome is of the options appraisal. That is absolutely a huge burden for them all to carry, and we do not for 1 minute underestimate how difficult that must be for people. No, we're not in their shoes, but we try to put ourselves in their shoes to understand the challenges that individuals are facing. Therefore, our offer of mental health and wellbeing support is something that we've been mindful of through the process. Our colleagues within the Health and Social Care Partnership arranged drop-in sessions that allowed people to attend. There's also a 6-week support group that has been offered by Mental Health Aberdeen, and British Red Cross also offered their services within that space as well. So that again, that is something we're acutely aware of, and we will continue to provide support within that space. Okay, what I'd like to move on to now is just a summary of the engagement that we undertook over July and the beginning of August. We identified different stakeholder groups, so detailed those on the slide. So yes, it's about the people living in the RAAC affected properties. We also looked at the wider community and obviously all council tenants as well in terms of a wider impact. The purpose of the engagement was very much to understand the impact that the various options may have on the residents, the local community, families and households. So we could use that to and consider that as part of the overall recommendation that was being put forward, and for you to have that information so that you could understand the impact for individuals. The engagement, we tried to make it as diverse as we could and as inclusive as we could. Notwithstanding, it was a very short timescale, not ideal in terms of the summer period, but in terms of we had to work with the time that was available for us. So we provided information packs with detailed information. There were drop-in sessions at different times of the day, different days of the week, different locations, in order to reach as many people as possible. And the purpose of those drop-in sessions was really to provide people with as much information as possible so they could understand the options that were being put forward, and they could really understand then the impact, understand some of the costs, in order for them to then be able to share the impact on them through the survey. So that's a quick overview. I guess what I would highlight in that, the level of interest from homeowners that we saw through the drop-in sessions and the survey responses was significant, which we would expect in terms of recognising the uncertainty that homeowners have been facing. One of the things as well is going back to what I mentioned around health and well-being. Given those concerns, we arranged for our community team, we arranged for the health and social care team and other organisations to be present at those drop-in sessions. So if there was anyone that wanted to engage at a different level in terms of their health and well-being, then that was available through those drop-in sessions as well. Okay, so before I hand over to Mr. Wilson, who's going to take us through kind of a bit more of the detail of the options appraisal, I thought it would just be helpful to highlight kind of some of the key messages that came through that engagement. So, you know, as I said at the beginning, all options have an impact on tenants, residents. There is no perfect solution here. There was very much a feeling of unsafe whilst RAAC is still being present in the properties. So Mr. Wilson will explain how that was considered as part of discounting kind of some of the options. Health and well-being, absolutely really strongly coming through. And the impact on the community and the concerns around as people leave, the security and antisocial behaviour and the wider community impacts. One of the things that we've done in direct response to kind of some of that feedback that started coming through is we've actually put an on-site daily presence within the community. So that's one of the inspectors who is there to identify and ensure action is being taken around things that are being observed, whether that might be increased collections, whether that's issues associated with the void properties. And as I say, we'll continue to review and understand kind of what else we can do within that space. For homeowners, as we heard earlier, concerns very much around the cost, and it was the cost of all the options that were being presented. You know, everyone had a negative impact for them. Very much the uncertainty of the future and that desire to seek a decision, and I think we heard that come through from the deputation this morning around that need to take a decision and for us to be able to move forwards and enable owners to be able to move forwards with those next steps. And I think, as we've heard as well, concerns around kind of market value and what that meant. So again, opportunity for us to explain to all of those who attended the drop-in sessions what that meant and what the intention was around that. So, very quick overview. Appreciate there's a whole load more information in the report, but just an overview of rehoming and engagement. What I'll do is I'll hand over to Mr. Wilson now, who will take through more of the options.
Thank you, Ms. Mackenzie. As a refresher, here we can see a typical property which has two external walls, one internal wall, and supporting two sets of RAAC panels in the roof, and this is across a number of roof finishes. We're very much aware that almost a third of the affected properties are in private ownership, but we have followed the Institution of Structural Engineers guidance in the assessment, and all the properties that we have surveyed to date, which are council properties, are characterised as high risk. Our expectation is that private properties would be in a similar situation. A summary of the options under consideration, for members will recall that option 1, coloured red in the slide, was discounted at the council meeting of 3rd of July. This option, whilst resolving the bearing distance, did nothing to mitigate the cracking and deflection. You'll notice within this slide that we have introduced a 3B option, and this is purely to differentiate the difference with simply a replacement roof in the case of 3A, and a replacement roof with refurbishment works to align with near future energy performance rating requirements in the case of 3B. There are two options we consider to be non-viable at this stage, the first one being option 2, which is installing a support timber frame. For the reasons shown, such as short-term, somebody got echo, limited inspection opportunity, impending net zero requirements, and the roof would still need to be replaced in the future. In the case of private homeowners, we are conscious of the feedback from the surveys. Peoples will be living in a property with RAAC, the future sale value risk, and cost of mitigation. It's important to note in the case of private property owners, the cost of mitigation is a very significant factor for all options, and I think we've heard that already this morning. From an officer point of view, we consider 2A to be not viable. Similarly for option 3A, whilst removing the RAAC panels, the cost of impending net zero aspirations, and we're talking about in the year circa 32 or around that date, you can see that the interventions would be needed soon after, given this is 2024 just now. For this reason, it makes sense that the refurbishment requirements should be done at the same time as the roof replacement. And for these reasons, we consider option 3A to be not viable. This means we have shortlisted 3 options, 3B, 4A and 4B. Be under no illusion, none are straightforward and all have significant challenges in their delivery. This slide shows a summary of the key factors under consideration, and it's actually duplicated within the report itself. All 3 options remove the RAAC risk. However, it's recognised there is an extensive time period in years to deliver the options. They all have very significant cost impacts, none of which show a positive investment value in monetary terms. But remember, because of the safety risk, doing nothing is not an option. We have to implement a way forward. Clearly, for all options, there will be financial and legal implications for all private homeowners, and I have already mentioned the significant cost implication for all options, whether it is shared ownership obligations in the case of flats or sole ownership in the case of other private properties. Having considered all the factors, show a positive investment value in monetary terms. But remember, because of the safety risk, doing nothing is not an option. We have to implement a way forward. Clearly, for all options, there will be financial and legal implications for all private homeowners, and I have already mentioned the significant cost implication for all options, whether it is shared ownership obligations in the case of flats or sole ownership in the case of other private properties. Having considered all the factors, the societal impacts, the commercial impacts, the challenges associated in the delivery of the options, and the feedback from the engagement sessions that Ms Mackenzie has already taken us through and made mention of, including the online surveys, we consider the optimum option to be demolish the affected housing and landscape and work through a plan to bring a new housing to Ballinagast that meets current demand profile and modern standards. This measured approach takes account of it will be the quickest tool, thereby removing the RAAC risk through demolition and making people safe. It accepts that more work needs to be done to determine how best new housing can build. It also recognises the significant cost implications and the need to determine what that financial envelope would be. And just to be clear, the intention is to have a cleared site inclusive of the private properties. Our recommendations within the report support the delivery of the outcome of our option appraisal. This would enable officers to take forward a number of work streams. I will now hand back to Ms Mackenzie to outline our proposed next steps.
Thank you. So in terms of next steps, at a very high level, we clearly need to continue with rehoming, providing support and assistance for those families yet to be rehomed. As Mr Wilson then has outlined, engaging with owners on the voluntary acquisition process, taking forward our plans for demolition and landscaping, and engaging with third parties over the site development and instructing the master plan for redevelopment of the site. I think probably the final point I would make is there's obviously still lots of work for us to continue with. Every individual circumstance is different. We heard that this morning from the examples that were provided in the deputations. It's really important that we continue with a person-centred approach. Steps. We need to meet with all homeowners and understand the situation for them personally and what that means. The impact of the council decision on, is significant, but it will be very much dependent on the individual circumstances. People have lived in these homes for many, many years, and there's clearly uncertainty for them, which we will hope some of that will be resolved today. It is one of the most difficult decisions, and at the heart of this is the people that are living in those homes and the impact of them. So that continued person-centric approach is what we would take forward following. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms McKenzie and Mr Wilson. Questions for officers?